Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europarliamentary. In today's episode, I'd like to talk about some European developments. So, a Dutch party, for which I voted quite a number of times, joined the European parliamentary group called Europe of Sovereign Nations. This party is called Forum for Democracy. It is led by Thierry Baudet, or used to be led by Thierry Baudet, was founded by Thierry Baudet, and is now led by Liedewij de Vos, because Thierry Baudet is on paternity leave or something like this. But he's still the, let's say, leading figure. He's like the Deng Xiaoping of the party, even though he's not perhaps the executive president right now. So I started voting for this party during the pandemic because it was the only party, or almost the only party, that wanted to protect my right to remain unvaccinated, so not to be discriminated against in Dutch society, and not to be excluded, so not to suffer from apartheid. This Dutch contribution to every language on earth, proud Dutch contribution of apartheid. This word, which means separation, and which was employed as a political system in South Africa in the last century. And this party, unfortunately, has no European parliamentary representation at the moment, but it for sure will in the next Europarliamentary elections, because it's running quite high in the polls. It's perhaps the fourth or the fifth Dutch party, which is something because the Netherlands has no threshold for entering parliament, and therefore it has about 18 parties. Last time I counted, there were 18. So yeah, the Netherlands has quite a large number of small parties, and this party was very vocal during the pandemic. It was vocal on things also before, but I was not paying attention because those things did not bother me concretely. So it was a party, for example, that opposed the accession treaty signed with Ukraine, the EU accession treaty from 2014. And it organized a referendum in the Netherlands, referendum which failed, if you look at it from the point of view of the government, or passed, if you look at it from the point of view of the organizers, to block the accession of Ukraine to join the EU. But back then I was not interested in these things. I was a proud Mark Rutte voter. I was voting for FvD, which is extremely stupid in hindsight, but yeah, I've done worst political decisions in my life. And I started voting for this party because during the pandemic, there were, I think, only 3 parties or 4 that were opposing the measures, and he was the strongest one. Also, the Turks party, the Party of the Turks, is also a political party I quite like in the Netherlands. The only problem I have with them is their anti-China stance, because they're completely in tune with Turkish geopolitics, and Turkey is trying to make this greater Turkey, this union of Turkish people, Turkic people, comprising also the Uyghurs from Xinjiang province of China. And so the Deng party, the Party of the Turks, is very, very anti-China, China hawkish. But apart from that, I'm pretty much in line with them. The Socialist Party is kind of too woke for my taste, even though it's not as woke as the Social Democrats. And it's not as radical economically as it used to be, because it was a Maoist party in its beginnings in the 1970s. And now it's kind of this wishy-washy party. It's not even a part of the European left anymore. It's just unaffiliated. And the European left is not exactly the biggest, the most, well, it is the most radical European Parliament group on the left-wing side in existence, but that's because the more radical parties are not affiliated, and this is actually the topic of my episode today. So I see the potential for collaboration in the sovereigntist sphere between the so-called extreme left and so-called extreme right. So what Slovakia has been doing, for example, for the past 2 decades, this cohabitation between the sovereigntist social democrats of Fico, so Smer and Hlas, both parties are sovereigntist, both parties are socially democratic. They branch from the same party, from Fico's initial party, and they governed with the so-called far right. several times in several legislatures. This is why Smer and Hlas were actually evicted from the party of the European Social Democrats, so from SND, and they are now unaffiliated. And there are some other interesting left-wing parties that are not affiliated. KKE, the Hellenic Communist Party, the Communist Party of Greece. It was not part of Syriza. It was not part of this woke coalition that took power in the Greek debt crisis. It remained steadfast. It entered parliament. It had about 7-8% each time. Its voters were not interested in this woke left phenomenon called Syriza, which ended up collaborating with the Troika, with the financial institutions imposing harsh debt repayment conditions and austerity against the Greek people. So there's this party as well. There's, of course, Bündnisser Wagenknecht. I've spoken about this party before. It's, I think, a very interesting party, the sovereigntist-left in Germany, non-woke, pretty radically left-wing from an economic point of view. And it's a party that could collaborate with Alternative für Deutschland. Die Linke could not. Die Linke and Alternative für Deutschland are kind of like the party of Mélenchon, France Insoumise, and what's the current name of the Front National, Rassemblement National of Marine Le Pen and Bardella. So, in my opinion, there is room for this sovereigntist collaboration between left-wing and right-wing forces, and I think the best example of this is Bulgaria. Slovakia was the best example with this cohabitation, and now the best example is Bulgaria because it involves a fusion, not only a cohabitation. This party that won the last parliamentary elections in Bulgaria by a landslide, it won an absolute majority in parliament, was made up of former members of the Socialist Party, which used to be the Communist Party of Bulgaria. Well, it's a socialist party that did not exactly go woke, and it did not exactly go Atlanticist. So it still had pro-Russian ties. And this party eventually did not make the threshold, the parliamentary threshold, because all of its voters voted for the new party of Rumen Radev called Progressive Bulgaria. But the right-wing sovereigntists, the nationalists of Bulgaria, also voted for this party. And this is how you got the sovereigntist-left, sovereigntist-right coalition fused into a party, fused into a sovereigntist party that is, conservative from a social point of view, not Atlanticist, or, I would say it's, it's not a stooge of the Atlanticist projects in Eastern Europe, that's for sure. And left-wing from an economic point of view. So, nostalgic about communism, trying to have again some sort of at least state capitalism, if not socialism outright. So, coming with left-wing economic measures, not only redistributive, but also to reindustrialize the country and so on. Multipolar. And so this party of Rumen Radev also capitalized on the sovereigntist right of the political spectrum in Bulgaria, and it managed to force, I think, 2 sovereigntist right-wing parties out of parliament. Well, depends what you mean by sovereigntist, because there were at least 4 with a broad definition of sovereigntist, and 2 in a narrow sense. So one of them did not enter parliament and the other one did, but with a very low score. And the Trumpist parties, allegedly sovereigntist but Trumpist, did not make it. So this is for me the future of governance in various European countries, and perhaps even at the level of the European Commission, in order to save Europe. If we want to save the European project, this is the kind of coalition we need. And on the sovereignties right part of the political spectrum in the European Parliament, there are 3 groups. There's European Conservatives and Reformists, which is very lightly conservative. It's not sovereigntist at all. kind of Trumpist, kind of with Likud, with establishment parties or parties that are trying to become establishment parties. They have prime ministers in office. I believe also Peter Fiala in the Czech Republic is from them, but I'm not sure. Or is it no? Babiš is with the Patriots. But anyway, Meloni is from European Conservatives and Reformists. Bart de Wever from Belgium is with European Conservatives and Reformists. In Romania, there is AUR, this party that is labeled as extremist and radical and so on, but it's very mainstream, more mainstream than I would have hoped for. So this is one right-wing, so-called sovereigntist European parliamentary group, although it's not really sovereigntist. It was started by the British Conservatives before they exited the European Union. So before Brexit, it was started by the British Conservatives, by Cameron. So you can imagine how sovereigntist it was, just cozying up with the City of London and with British capital and so on. In the United Kingdom, the most sovereigntist party, well, if we discard George Galloway because he's been exiled, if we discard the British Workers' Party, then the Green Party is the most sovereigntist, because any kind of right-wing party in Britain caters to the interests of the big oligarchic financial capital from the City of London. It caters to the empire. It cannot be sovereigntist in the sense of giving power to the people. Only a left-wing party can do that. So anyway, there's European Conservatives and Reformists. There is, and of course, the European Conservatives and Reformists also have PiS, also have this Polish political party that's quite prominent and that gave its president. And then there's Patriots for Europe, which I think is even larger than ECR. It's the party of Fidesz, of Rassemblement National, and the party of Andrei Babiš, quite a lot of Central European parties. And then there is Europe of Sovereign Nations, made up of the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, Vazraždane, this nationalist Bulgarian party, which is pretty compatible with left-wing politics and with socialist politics, but not with the woke part. So not with cultural Marxism, as it's called, or these postmodern identities. No, it's a nationalist socialist party, if you want. And this is why I think this group is quite compatible. Europe of Sovereign Nations is quite compatible with the idea also of a radical economic left-wing party group, which is non-woke, because the woke part is a no-no, so it's a deal breaker. But just like Fico manages to collaborate in Slovakia with nationalist parties, even though he's a social democrat, but he's a sovereigntist social democrat. And in Bulgaria, both socialists and nationalists came together and voted for a national socialist government. I believe there is room for another European parliamentary group, left-wing parties that are right-wing from a cultural point of view, have traditional values and so on. They are left-wing economically. They want state capitalism. They basically want to adapt the Chinese model of governance, because the Chinese Communist Party is not exactly woke, and it's not exactly soft, and it's a party state, so it has to be militaristic, it has to be hawkish, it has to be everything. It's not exactly a bunch of hippies. So these parties also want to go in the same direction. They want to be statist parties, not catering to a minority but to the majority. And how better to serve the majority of your citizens if not by representing their needs, right? So the majority of the society is culturally conservative, and economically, of course, they are not financial elites, so they want redistribution, they want social safety nets, they want public services, they want state capitalism. So these parties, as I said, the Progressive Bulgaria, Smer and Hlas from Slovakia, Bündnisser Wagenknecht, KKE. Perhaps in France, something that would be compatible with Front National could be built on the left, because Mélenchon's party, even though I respect it for many things, is quite detrimental in the oustal of the neoliberal center. Renew Europe and Macron and this neoliberal so-called center is the scourge of Europe, in my opinion, and it needs to be ousted. And for this, there needs to be a collaboration between the non-systemic left and non-systemic right. I would not call them extremists, because I don't think they are extremists. They're just on the edge of the political spectrum, because there's nothing further. But in the French case, I think it would be quite useful for a sovereigntist left to be perhaps to the left of Front National, that would be willing to cooperate with, to the left of France Insoumise, which would be willing to cooperate with Front National, because otherwise you cannot have a coalition government, and you cannot oust the center. In any kind of second round confrontation, if the center party manages to enter, then it wins, because the voters of the party that did not get in, and that is farther from the center on the other side, will prefer the center to the other extreme. This is why we have to put into practice the horseshoe theory of the political spectrum, the fact that the extreme left and the extreme right are compatible. I want to see this in action, because in the French case, unfortunately, they despise each other, and they are basically keeping the neoliberal center in power with this constant struggle and with this lack of compromise. It's somewhat the same situation in Spain. So in Spain, the Social Democrats are somewhat sovereigntist, so they do not bow to Israel, and they do not bow to the United States and to NATO in general. And this forces the sovereigntist right. So, for example, Vox, which is part of the Patriots for Europe European group, it forces them to take positions against the position of the government and to be super Zionist and super Atlanticist, which I think, in my opinion, undermines their credibility as a sovereigntist party. In my opinion, a sovereigntist party, even if it's left-wing or right-wing, it needs to put national interest first, and there is no way you can think that it is in the national interest of your country to plunder the state coffers by allocating 5% of your budget, of your GDP. So that's like 1/6 of your budget to rearming yourself, to cut social expenditure for this, to enter a war as a proxy on behalf of another country, on behalf of the hegemon, and so on. So for me, if a party is sovereigntist, it doesn't matter if it's left-wing or right-wing, it has to uphold the national interest, otherwise it's not sovereigntist. So this is why the best collaboration I can think of is the sovereigntist left governing with the sovereigntist right, to oust the neoliberal sold-out center that is run by the network of foreign agents. It's the same in every European country, and so far only Slovakia and Bulgaria managed to do this collaboration and to bypass the aesthetics and the label to actually govern for their people. I would hope for such an outcome in Germany as well, but as I said, Die Linke is the greater party, and Bündnisser Wagenknecht is more compatible with AfD, but Bündnisser Wagenknecht is not in parliament at the moment and doesn't look like it's standing a good chance to enter the Bundestag. And as a consequence of this, I see the cordon sanitaire functioning even further and with graver consequences. So you can imagine if you have this dysfunctional coalition between the FvD and the CDU, and you add the Greens as well, because the cordon sanitaire needs to keep the AfD out. And then you also add Die Linke, because AfD is polling at 30%, and it can only grow higher by how Germany is deindustrializing and how jobs are lost and how Germany is basically committing suicide and preparing for war. But if there's no party willing to govern alongside it, then the other parties will have to make a coalition government. So you'll have the Christian Democrats with the Social Democrats, with the Liberals, with the Greens, with the former communists of East Germany, essentially, which are Die Linke, instead of having one of these parties govern together with AfD. And this party would be Bündnis Wagenknecht, but through all sorts of machinations, this party is kept out of parliament. It missed the electoral threshold by a couple thousand votes, something like this. And there was alleged fraud against it anyway. So this is what I wanted to tell you. I envisage this sovereigntist left-wing European parliamentary group to the left of the left. The left in the European Parliament is one European parliamentary group, and this would be to the left of the left by sovereigntist European parties. It will probably be called Stalinist or something like this. And it would have as a main difference with the existing left-wing European parliamentary group the fact that it is more, perhaps it is more radical economically, more state capitalism, more statism in the economy, but more importantly, the fact that it's not woke. And the fact that it's not woke allows such a party to govern together with another sovereigntist party that's on the right side of the spectrum and that prioritizes, let's say, right-wing cultural expressions, but overall is still dedicated to the national interest. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about today. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe, and until next time, take care. Bye.